Hi there, welcome to this new build series, and in this series we're going to be building the Gladiator. Now you can see the plans behind me. This is a fantastic and quite a large vintage model that was first published in Air Trails in March 1941. It's a really classic design by Maurice Schönbrunn, and I hope I pronounced that right. But it really is a nice looking model. It's got a really long fuselage, and we've got a 67.5-inch wingspan with this really broad chord. And let me just measure that because I've forgotten how broad it is. Yeah, it's a 14-inch deep chord. And I think somewhere I read this has got almost 6 square feet of lifting area, so it really is a lovely big vintage model. Now, as I said, originally it would have been free flight. I'm going to convert this to 3-channel RC, so we're going to put in a rudder, we're going to put in an elevator, and we're going to have a throttle. Now, the power plant for this was originally a 10cc I think it's late 1930s, could have been early 40s, 10cc Dynamite spark ignition engine. So even though it was a big engine, it wasn't hugely powerful, and a model of this size is quite light because of the construction, and so we don't need to put in a hugely powerful engine. And what I'm thinking of having up front is a Sato 4-stroke, and it will either be, I've got 2 candidates that I'm thinking of, either a 56, which is overpowered for this model probably, or a Sato 45. We'll see when it comes to it, but the engine will be mounted on the front here on an aluminium plate, so it's easy to take it in and take it out and put something else in. Now, I've said about the wing being massive, but look at the tailplane as well. I mean, that's half of it. It's a huge tailplane, and I just love the long fuselage. It really is a beast of a model. Now, if you haven't seen it already, you'll know the nose here is really, really short. We've got a CG there, and so we've got the nose, and then this huge long fuselage. So it is going to be a real interesting build to get this to balance. And if you've seen my build series before, you know I really don't like adding weight to a model, or dead weight, lead, to balance it, whether it's in the tail or the nose. This one, I'm going to try and get everything forward of the CG, the batteries, the engine obviously, but the servos and whatever else. But I can't help thinking that we are going to end up with a little bit of lead in the nose. Now, I've had a couple of people say to me, well, why don't you lengthen the nose, when I've been talking to friends about this. But for me, with a vintage model, I would much rather stick to the plans, true to form, vintage design, and put some weight in the nose, than to alter the design, because I don't like vintage models where the nose has been, it's just a pet hate of mine, where the nose has been extended. I just kind of like to stick to the original design in that respect anyway. So I think we're going to be adding some lead. Now, the wing, we're going to be building the wing first, I think, and in this video I'm going to be looking at making the ribs and the spars and some of the extra bits that we need to put in at the front of the wing. We'll have a closer look at that in a second. Now, the spars are 1/4 by 5/8 balsa, and they're just bottom section spars, so there's no chance of putting in shear webbing, where you've got 2 spars and you shear web between. Now, I could change the design, but it's a very narrow rib, it's a very narrow wing to reduce the drag. It was designed as a competition model that would just get up to an altitude quickly and just stay there floating. I could alter the design, but I want to keep it as original as I can, because there's something about a wing a vintage wing like this where you don't see a top spar and you just see the kind of the corrugated effect of the covering as it dips back down uninterrupted between the ribs. And my Tomboy Senior is a classic example of that, and I'll show you that in a bit, just what I mean. So I will first of all start to get the ribs done, and I tell you what, I'll move the camera around, we'll have a look at the Tomboy wing, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do with the ribs. Okay, well, we can see here on my Tomboy Senior how the covering here is just dipping down between the individual ribs, and you haven't got that top spar there that is interrupting that and making the wing look very different and more modern. It's just the covering and the ribs, you can see, and I really like that look, and I really want to keep that look with this wing. So what I'm going to be doing is these balsa spars, I'm going to be strengthening those because I don't think they're strong enough, and I'm going to be putting in some spruce, I think, and also some carbon fibre just on this central section, so that the up to the dihedral brake, because this is a polyhedral wing, we've got a flat section, this is a centre line, we've got a flat section, and then we have a dihedral brake here. So I'll be putting in some carbon fibre, I think, up to that dihedral brake, just to make it stronger at the root where it meets the fuselage. So anyway, let's have a look at making those ribs first. Right, well, this set of plans is really good, and you can download it from the AutoZone website, and there'll be a link in the description below this video. I should have perhaps said that earlier. But when we look at the plans, we've got all of the ribs for the tail, we've got them for the outer tips of the wings here, the smaller ribs, and then we've got the more centrally placed ribs. And for the central section, we have 17 ribs that are identical, and we're going to build those all as one, as a sandwich. Now, I'll say there's 17 that are identical. A couple of these, or 3, 4 of these, 5 of these, sorry, at the front will need to be trimmed just a little bit to make them fit in, but they are, the rest of the rib is the same shape as all of the others. So we're going to be making those as a sandwich technique, and I'm going to cut out this section here. I've got a spare set of the plans, bits of the plans, so I'm going to cut out that rib, and I'm going to be making 2 plywood templates that I'm going to bolt together. I'm going to bolt plywood in between, and then we'll sand them all together so they're all identical. We'll have a look at that a little bit more detail in a minute. When we come to these ribs, as they get progressively smaller, I've got these which I'm going to cut out, and I'm going to stick onto some balsa and cut them out individually. Just a technique that I've developed over the years, which works quite well, which we'll have a look at. And as I said, I've got all of this printed out, and some of them I've even started to cut out, which will get stuck onto the wood. So we've got the ribs to do, so that's the first job. The second job, I need to source some spruce for those spars and some carbon fibre to make sure we've got a wing that's strong enough and fit for purpose, because I really don't want to use balsa. I think if it's a contest model that's not RC and it just goes up there and floats, balsa is probably fine. But I'd rather have something a little bit more resilient and durable perhaps. And if we see up here, there's this front block and these 2 bits that I'm going to need to laminate some balsa together to make those, and we'll have a look at those. But first, the ribs. Okay, so we've got our 2 identical ribs now, and you can see these ribs, they're a lovely shape, quite narrow, but they've got this lovely under camber which will really help with the lift with this contest model. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to put the rib onto the balsa, and we're going to cut around this, and we're going to try and be as economical as we can. As I said, we need 17 ribs, so we don't want to cut too tight. We need to allow to have a little bit for sanding, but obviously we don't want to cut them massive, just because then we've got a lot of material to remove, and also it ends up using a lot more balsa and being more costly. So if we just cut that out, and I will do the underside of this, because as I said, it's an under camber. Now, there we go. You'll notice I haven't cut the spars out yet, because I haven't got the spars sorted yet, and I would rather do those when I know exactly what size they're going to be. So right, there we go, there's our first blank, and now we will try and organise this so we're getting the most out of the balsa, and we want to have the grain running along the length of the rib just to give this as much strength as possible. So we'll put that up against the top there, and just cut this one out. So I will get on and cut these out, and then once they're done we'll have a quick look and we'll move on to these smaller outer ribs. Right, well, I've got all 17 ribs cut out now, and it took me 2 sheets of the 1/16 balsa to cut those out, which was quite good. And what I'm doing now is I'm just putting the template on top of the rib, put a clamp on, and then I'm just using my pin vise with a 2mm drill just to put a hole in the 3 locations where the bolts are going to go, and just run that through nice and quickly, and then we can start to build up this sandwich. So we've got the plywood template on the outside, and we've got 3 lengths of 2mm threaded rod going through, and we're just building up the ribs like this. And then once we've got them all bolted together, we'll sand them all as one. Now, it's a really quick process this. It probably took me, I don't know, 10 minutes, something like that at the most, to cut out the ribs, and it's probably going to take me about the same to get the sandwich together. And then we've just got a little planing and balsa sanding to get it all as one, so they're all identical. And I find it quite therapeutic. I quite like this this job. I quite like the preparation. So I know other people don't particularly like this phase of building and would rather do things on perhaps a laser cutter, but for me this is how I much prefer to do it. So I will get all this together, and then we'll have a look when it's done, and we'll move on to those outer ribs that are all changing in size. Now, it just occurred to me I should address the situation of why I'm doing these individually rather than just stacking them up and doing it on my pillar drill all as one. Well, you can do that, but I find that it's much more accurate to get them like this, because if you line them up as a stack, it's quite easy to get the odd 1 or 2 that aren't in line very well, and you end up with a rib that's a little bit lower than it should be. So you can do that if you want to, but I know somebody will say, why don't you do it? So I thought I'd just address that comment. I just find this a more accurate way of doing it, and like I said earlier, it takes very little time to do this. Right, now I've got my sandwich all bolted together, and it's looking nice and square, and all we need to do now is sand this up, and we'll have our 17 ribs. I mean, we can use a plane if we want to, and just if we've got a lot of excess to take off, then there's no reason why we can't use a plane. And as long as we're planing between the plywood or resting on the plywood like this, then we're not going to go too far down. And the same with the sanding. So once we've got that done, we can then just sand this, and we'll see our ribs starting to take shape. And you heard the sound change then, hopefully, and you can hear as soon as you start sanding the plywood. I mean, people say, you know, you could use aluminium because it's stronger, or put CA on the edge of the plywood because it'll make it tougher. but to be honest you don't need to, because plywood takes quite a bit of sanding and you can hear the change there as you start to touch the plywood. So as long as you sand it carefully, I don't think you really need to treat the plywood at all. So I will get on and do this, and then we'll have a look at the other ribs. Okay, definitely time for an update. I've been cracking on here and really making some headway. Now we've got the wing plan here. This is the right hand wing. We've got the fuselage there, the centre line of the wing here. And I'm going to build this in 3 parts. So I'm going to build the centre section, which is from here, where we have a dihedral break, from here out to the other side. And then I'm going to build the 2 tips separately, and then I'm going to join them with dihedral braces. There's a 6.5 inch lift at this far tip. Now, as far as the spars, I've sourced some spruce, and I'm going to be using 3/16 by 3/8 spruce for these spars instead of the balsa that is suggested. And so I've got a piece for there that will do the centre section. I've got a piece here that will do this outer section. These are all a little bit too long and need trimming down. And I've got another piece for the other wing, so we'll put that on one side for the moment. These are lovely and straight, and I'm making sure I'm keeping them nice and straight if I can. So we've got those. Now the spars at the front here are 1/4 by 5/8. Well, I couldn't get any 1/4 by 5/8, but I could get some 1/4 by 1/2 inch. So I've got some 1/4 by 1/2 inch and 1/4 by 1/8, and I've just stuck those together with some PVA, clamped them nice and straight, and I've made up 2 spars so far. So I've still got this to glue. I've got the 1 spar for the centre section to the dihedral break, and then I've got one for going out to the wingtip like that. So we've got the spruce spars now all sorted. And what else? Before I go on to the ribs. Yeah, I've got the spruce spars. I've also done a bit of timber for the front here. There's quite a kind of an aerofoil shape on the front of the wing where the wing curves in like that. I've got this central section. On the plan it says 3/4 inch blocks. I'm not sure how that works, because this is a lot bigger than a 3/4 of an inch. So that's why I've laminated them, and that will fit there. That will fit quite nicely like that. I've got some hard balsa for this 1/4 inch square leading edge. I've got some 1/4 by 1 inch for the trailing edge, and I just need now to clean this up and to remove quite a lot of balsa to get this to fit on that side, just the same as that one. As you can see, it's a lot bigger than it needs to be. Now the final thing is the ribs, which we were doing earlier, and I've got these nicely sanded now, and they're all profiled and looking really nice. I've even done the bird mouth, so you can see that's quite a nice tight fit, and the slot on the back I've already cut out, and that is a really nice snug fit. And I did that by, just get this out, I did that by cutting down with the razor saw, marking the actual piece I'm going to use on there to make sure I get the right width and the right depth, and then I cut down vertically with my razor saw. I actually held it in the metalwork vise just like that to make sure that it was nice and secure, cut down, and then I used my fret saw to simply go down the side, over and across the bottom. And then it was a little bit tight, which was a good thing, and I just got a bit of a file and just sanded that, and so it was just, or filed it until it was just the right fit. I've still got this rear one to do, and then I think we'll be more or less done with this, so that and the rear spar slot. Right, well, I've now got all of the components done, and the next job is to start building this wing. I've got the trailing edge, which is the 1 inch by 1/4 hard balsa. I haven't shaped that or profiled it yet. I'll do that once I've built the wing with a plane and one of my sanding sticks. The spruce spars we've already had a look at, we've got those sorted. The leading edge on this is quite small for such a substantial wing. It's 1/4 inch square, and I've got a nice straight piece of hard balsa for that. Also done this central section, which still needs quite a lot of profiling. It's not glued together yet, but it still needs quite a lot of profiling, but I'll do that when I'm setting out the wing, just to make sure that I get it right, because these bits here will need to be tapered down to meet this 1/4 inch square, so there's still quite a lot of balsa to come off that. But I quite like this bit, because this is the bit that actually brings the wings forward of the cabin and the windshield, and make this such a substantial wing, because we've got the fuselage down here, the cabin, as you come to the front, the cabin ends there, and you've got the windshield, and then you've got the wings jutting forward, and really add the character, and yeah, just make it quite an interesting looking wing. I think earlier I referred to this as a polyhedral wing. Actually, I think I'm more correct in saying it's a dihedral tipped wing, or a tip dihedral wing, because essentially we have a flat central section, and then it's the tips that are angled up. So I think a tip dihedral is the correct terminology. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a really spectacular wing. I've also got the slot done in the rear of the ribs, so they're all done now. The only thing I haven't done, which I mentioned earlier on in the video, is I was going to be working on these ribs on the tip, where they decrease in size, where they taper down. But I think I'll be better off leaving those for another video. I'm just very mindful of the length of these videos. I don't want to make them too long, and I think that'd be better placed when I've got the central section built and I'm doing the 2 wingtips, either as part of the wingtip videos, or maybe just as a very short standalone video showing how I do those. Now, I did say I'm going to put in a little bit of carbon fibre into the central section to give the wing a lot more strength down at the root, where we're going to have problems if the wings are going to break and clap. So I just want to kind of reinforce them there, make it more resilient. But you'll have to come back to the next video, the construction of this central section, to actually see what we're going to do, how we're going to do that. So anyway, as I said, dead excited to get on and build this central section. So I'm going to pull this video to a close, and hopefully you'll come back and see how we get on in building that central section. Thanks very much for watching.